Objective markers, glowing icons, clustered maps, and light up paths. All of these are standard modern quality of life features in games these days. We all know what they add to the experience, but what do they take away? That's what we need to understand. So let's first look at the original Tomb Raider games, or specifically here, the remastered ones. What if there was a big arrow pointing you in the direction you needed to go, objective markers over each switch you needed to pull, or a minimap to orientate yourself with? The modern game design approach would say these are all good additions. It helps the player reach the objectives and progress the game. But is that what playing a game is all about? Following a yellow icon that literally tracks you in real time how far away you are to the next objective? In Tomb Raider and other games of the era, when you begin a level, there's none of these features. It's just you and the environment around you, and you need to overcome it yourself. Levers and switches sometimes blend into the environment. Important items don't glow to grab your attention. There are no clues on how to solve any of the puzzles. The game forces you to play it rather than just to passively stroll through it without actually engaging with it. In-game maps are great, but games that don't have them and have complex world design, it forces players to learn how to navigate them. If you can navigate a game without a map, it shows that you have had to learn your surroundings, which actually has a psychological impact on you as the player. In Dark Souls there is no map, but do you really need one? It might be cool to have one, but maybe I just like staring at maps. If you have played through Dark Souls at some stage, and maybe you've not picked it up in years, you could probably still make your way from Firelink Shrine all the way to Ash Lake from memory alone, and that's a pure testament to the amazing world design of From Software, which wouldn't be recognised as well if there was a map with your location pinpointed at all times, or something glowing on the screen leading you to where you need to go. The psychological impact this has is that it grounds you in the world you're exploring, as it needs the same level of understanding as if you were there yourself exploring the world. You take note of distant objects to orientate yourself with, you remember specific paths that lead to their destination, and your internal minimap, the one in your own brain, it becomes more interconnected and personal. If you had the ability to look at a map with your location at any time, your ability to connect within the world is greatly reduced, or at the very least, it's going to take a very long time to reach that same level of connection than a game without a map. Games like Tomb Raider and Dark Souls, it gives a real experience of exploration that a lot of modern games just don't have. And feeling lost and not sure where to go, this is a fine line of frustration and perseverance. If you're lost and don't know where to go, this is either the game design being potentially a bit too vague, or maybe you as a player just not paying attention enough, and sometimes it's a combination of both. But being lost can also be part of the experience the game wants to evoke. Your character has never explored the world of Lordran, just as Lara Croft has never explored this ice cave before. It makes perfect sense that you have a feeling of uncertainty of which way to go. Having a map or glowing markers to guide you, it creates a disconnect between you, the player, and the character that you're moving around in the in-game world. When you enter into a new area in Tomb Raider, you need to remember locked doors you know you're going to need to double back to, collecting items and then thinking what they might actually be used for, and observing each room to ensure you're not missing out on something important. It's up to you, as the player, to absorb this information from being in the level to progress to the next area. There are times where I do get lost and not sure where to go, and I've definitely learned from the mistake of leaving the game when lost, so when I come back to it, I'm even more lost, but that's my fault as a player. But the sense of overcoming and finding a way through the levels are immensely satisfying, and this would be diminished if there was a big arrow telling me where to go. Even in the Elder Scrolls games, where it's so easy to explore and not get lost, they ended up putting a spell to show you the path of where you need to go. This is in addition to a compass that already has the direction of where you need to go for your next objective. Seeing this spell part of the demo they showed in 2011, even at the time, it made me think that this game is either super complicated to navigate, which I knew it wouldn't be, or the developers are taking time to cater to the lowest common denominator. In my opinion, the experience of exploring an ancient ruin is degraded when there's no possibility of getting lost, or at least you the player making the decision of where to go first, deciding which door to go through, turning left or right at the fork in the road.
So you guys, another cool spell, which is clairvoyance. This is something you can learn that will show you a path to your current objective, which is nice in a lot of these dungeons.
And I'm not against minimaps or all objective markers, I'm definitely not a realism purist, which is why I don't really enjoy overly realistic games, and I put that in quotes especially with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 with some of the things I've seen.
Alright, here we go. We've all been waiting for this. Here we go. Oh my god, it's time! It's time! 40 hours of gameplay led up to this.
I'm looking for the local Sawbones. They said I've never seen the likes of him.
So fucking welcome, man. What you know about my family?
But if you put a mechanic in a game that prioritizes realism over fun, it's just a bad design choice. And in a game like Ghost of Tsushima, where the character you play, they have knowledge of the world that you the player obviously doesn't. So it makes sense to have a way to guide the player across the open world with ease. When Jin Sakai, when he says something like, let's go to the Temple of the Moon, or something like that, we as the player have no idea where that is, as we don't live in 15th century Japan. But our character we play, Jin Sakai, he does know where it is. So to be more immersive, it makes sense to give the player gamified tools to navigate the world with very little issue. And in some games you can choose to remove all these features, which is fine, but a game like Witcher 3, where you can remove almost everything, it is nice that you can do this, but you can tell the game wasn't initially designed to play with this exclusively in mind. However, game designers now, they know their levels or worlds they build, they can just be a conveyor belt of content and then have the wider level design built around this. This is opposite to games like Tomb Raider, where the levels are not created as simple geometry you navigate, but as a character you need to learn, understand and appreciate, and only then can you make progress, because this is vital to knowing what to do. As Chris Metzen said, a designer of World of Warcraft, his attitude when creating the World of Warcraft, the world you explore, that is the main character. In its purest and rawest form, playing classic World of Warcraft without any quest helpers or other add-ons like that is a very different experience. Having to actually read the quest text, understand where you need to go, is explained in the detail, and this forces you to follow simple directions. It forces you to be immersed. And this is all diminished with all the extra quality of life add-ons you can get, which in some cases are literally follow the big arrow to level up. When playing Warcraft back in the day, I never actually used Questy, and I managed to get to level 70 without it. But did I use Wowhead and other websites for guidance? Well, absolutely. But this did not detract from the overall experience. Just as in Dark Souls, it would be insane to consider that all players would individually figure out to use the Peculiar Doll, a seemingly random trash item with a cryptic description, and if you used it by this massive painting halfway through the game, well, now you can just enter the painting and explore this hidden content that would be otherwise unavailable to you. Even this as side content, it forces the player to engage in research out with the game, then bringing that knowledge to their own playthrough to enhance the experience by playing content you would otherwise miss. This would all be lost if the item description of the doll said use on this big painting, and then an arrow would lead you right to it. The sense of mystery and intrigue would all be gone. Most of you, if you're raised on the PS2 era or before, there is a nostalgic feeling that games back then had a sense of magic behind them that made them so much more memorable. But this wasn't magic. It's just that you as a 9-year-old had to learn and navigate these old games, as many of the quality of life designs we see now, they're just simply not present in these older games. And to me, memories of experiences where you had to learn something that are far more profound than experiences that are ultimately passive in comparison. Horror games in particular, they typically avoid using minimaps or maps altogether, unless the use of the map it relates to the game character experience, such as Silent Hill 2 or Resident Evil 2. You need to physically find maps, and they are only updated and changed as you, the player, explore, as if you're progressing each area. And this actually adds to the immersion, as it makes sense for James Sunderland in Silent Hill 2 to have a map he finds of the surrounding area, and as you explore, James adds notes to the maps, highlights locked doors he's encountered and dead ends. The map updates as you play, a real indicator of your progress that makes sense in the world. Horror games are in many ways exploration puzzle games, and the designers understand that the whole experience would be reduced if players could follow a glowing path on the ground to the next objective. It would remove or at least diminish the horror elements the game is trying to project. So I think we can all easily see why horror games don't have these typical objective icon mechanics. It makes the game less scary and it detracts from the atmosphere. But what about other games? Why isn't there the same level of thought of the impact of having these features in games considered? Well, it's hard to say specifically, and some of the games it makes sense to have these gamified tropes. But I believe a lot of the overuse of these features is because a lot of big AAA development is designed by committee, focus groups of the lowest common denominator. You know, some idiot gives feedback in a playtest that they can't figure out a puzzle or navigate an area a 7-year-old could figure out if they stop to think for at least 2 minutes. So the developers make the game idiot-proof, reducing the experience so everyone can experience it. And in trying to make a game for everyone, it's the same as Hollywood making films for as wide an audience as possible. These experiences become basic, boring, uninspired, ugly, and at a fundamental level, they can't provoke a higher meaning when they're reduced to the level for someone with a double-digit IQ to also enjoy. In my view, modern video games, where each AAA game has become this over-the-shoulder action game, you press X to shoot or X to slash the bad guys, and you follow the map marker while Reddit dialogue carries the narrative. How am I expected to look back fondly on these forgettable experiences? The most obvious examples of this is Ubisoft games, a company so creatively bankrupt that they just make the same game over and over. And I know there's some exceptions to this, but if you look at Watch Dogs, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, these are all just the same game. And if you can't see this, then you're probably the type of person who buys them and enjoys them. And I did buy Far Cry 3 and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood back in the day, and I thought they were great games. But why would I buy it again and again every year for over 10 years? But let's just bring this back to why older games felt better and why we're nostalgic about them. Many of them were experiences we had to actually learn and figure out how to progress. Modern gaming is like a roller coaster. It can be fun, but it's a controlled fun, where everyone experiences the same thing. On the other hand, older games are like a jigsaw puzzle. There are different ways to approach it and enjoy it. It requires some patience, and once beaten, it's a true sense of accomplishment. Not everyone will make it to the end, and nor should they. Everyone was supposed to. The puzzle would just be too simple to even enjoy. Some modern games attempt to recapture these lost elements of game design, and these design tropes are not good because they're old, they're good because they're timeless. To reinvent for reinvent's sake is destructive, and to alter game design for players who would never enjoy the experience to begin with without a glowing arrow that ushers them around until the credits roll, it's just sad to see. Nostalgia in gaming can be dangerous though, as it can make you feel positive towards things that are just simply not good ideas. Again, Tomb Raider, there was these save crystals in the first versions of the game, where in the remastered game, you can save the game whenever and whenever you like. But in the older versions, there was these specific save crystals, where these were the spaces you could save the game, and it just wasn't as fun, as it would draw out the experience and force you to replay sections again and again, when it might just be one particular tricky jump that's causing you some trouble. So having to go through 10 minutes or so of climbing to reach the same spot you died, to me that's just not good design. But the essence of these games, which seem more simple because the screen isn't littered with icons and objective markers, is what people are calling out for when they say they can't enjoy games anymore. But in fact it's the modern game design which is oversimplifying the experience, as older games rely on using your brain, which for some people is just not possible.